Hi, a very good day to all. So I would like to present the topic on the ocean pollutions with the title Sources, Impact and Future Directions. So I'm Tuan Mohamad Fauzan bin Tuan Omar from the Faculty of Science and Marine Environment, University of Malaysia, Terengganu. Alright, let's move on to the next slide. So my presentation outline, I will talk about the emerging ocean pollution issues, sources and impact of ocean pollutions, and lastly, the future directions of ocean pollution monitoring. So for the introductions, basically the oceans are essentials because they provide foods to billions, livelihoods for millions, and also the sources of multiple essential medicines. And as we know that the ocean cover more than 70% of the Earth's surface, and it holds about 97% of the world's water, as well as hosts for some of the planet's most diverse ecosystems and support economies in countries around the world. As we know that the climate change and other environmental disruptions coming from the human origins have caused sea surface temperatures to rise, glaciers to melt, and harmful algal species, as well as pathogenic bacteria to migrate into waters that were previously uncontaminated. So this will likely have an impact on the oceans because of the various contaminations into the world's water. And therefore, these presentations will review the sources and impacts of ocean pollutions, as well as projecting the future directions for an effective pollutions monitoring. Some issues of emerging ocean pollutions, as we can see from these figures. This figure, several ocean pollution issues that arises in several decades ago. So the first one we can see here, plastic waste. It is estimated around 10 million metric tons of plastic enter the seas each year. And then come the oil spills coming from the petrochemical industries, or coming from the ship activities. And the third one is mercury. So basically it's released from two main sources, either from coal combustions and small-scale gold mining. And also they have a manufactured chemical such as phthalates, bisphenol A, flame retardants, as well as pharmaceutical waste. So we can also they have pesticides. The sprays on crops often end up in the oceans via rivers and water courses. Lastly, the sixth emerging issues is the nutrients. So coming from agriculture, fertilizers, animal feedlot waste, and human sewage increases the frequency of harmful algal blooms. So the sources of ocean pollutions. So it is estimated around approximately 80% of ocean pollutions coming from land-based sources, while discharge from marine shipping, offshore industrial operations, and waste disposal at sea account for the remaining 20%. So based on report by European Environment Agency, they reported that pollution by toxic metals, industrial chemicals, and plastic waste is at problem levels in the Baltic Sea, the Black Sea, the Mediterranean Sea, as well as the Northeast Atlantic Oceans. And marine pollution by plastic waste reflects massive global growth in plastic productions, which now exceeds 420 million tons per year. And the uncontrolled economic developments and rapid populations growth along the world's coast has led to pollution of inshore waters by industrial releases, agricultural runoff, and sewage. And from these figures, we can see that Asia produces half of the plastics in the world, then followed by the North America and the Europe. So basically, the plastic productions is coming from the Asian countries. And based on this figure, we can see that the world oceans are infested with plastics. We can see that the North Pacific having 1.990 trillions plastics in as well as we can see that Indian Oceans contributed about 1.3 trillion ton metrics of plastics. Alright, and the other oceans are also infested by plastics. You can see that South Pacific, South Atlantic, and North Atlantic all having infested by plastics. So the microplastic is a hot topic at the moment. With various research done on the microplastics contaminations. So basically, microplastics have two forms. So as what we can see here, this is a primary microplastics in form of noodles, and the other figures is a secondary microplastics, basically plastic fragments. So and then microplastics can be classified in different forms, including microbeads, microfilms, microfibers, and microfragments. And research done by various research organizations that these small plastics concluded that the small plastics pieces are often mistaken as food and can be ingested by small organisms like planktons, and as well as larger organisms like whale sharks. Alright, so let's move on to the impacts of the pollutions. So basically, we discussed about the four contamination or four pollutants. So the first one is harmful algae blooms. So HAB directly harms human health by producing toxins, potent natural compounds that can cause disease and death, and most commonly through consumption of contaminated foods. And the chemical additive, the second one is chemical additive from plastic pollutions. So as we know that the plastics have a chemical additive in their ingredients. So the concentration of some chemicals have been found to be order of magnitudes higher in microplastics particles than in the surrounding water. So for example, the example of the chemical additive can be bisphenol A, octanols, and etc. Then impacts of toxic chemical pollutants. So basically, the toxic chemical pollutants can be in the metals, in the form of metals, persistent organic pollutants, dioxins, plastics, chemical, and pesticides. So this chemical can cause cardiovascular effects, developmental and neurobehavioral disorders, and metabolic disease, such as endocrine disruptors and cancer. And the fourth pollutants are methyl mercury. So it is a persistent pollutant in the marine environments. And these pollutants, it can bioconcentrate as it's moved up to the food web. So that predator can accumulate methyl mercury in their tissues that are 10 million or more times greater than those in surrounding waters. So that's basically several impacts of ocean pollutions. So what next? We know about the sources, we know about the impacts, so we want to discuss about the future directions of ocean pollution monitoring. So we concluded that they have 5 directions for ocean pollution monitoring. So the first one, using the airborne and satellite sensor. So this will advance the science of chemical and plastics pollution monitoring. So global observation systems, development of GOS for mercury, and as well as GOS for persistent organic pollutants. So this will speed up the monitoring systems for the mercury contaminations and persistent organic pollutants monitoring. And we also have a global monitoring plan, data warehouse. So this warehouse is established under the auspices of the Stockholm Conventions for persistent organic pollutants monitoring. And systematic measurement, particularly in mesopelagic or midwater, as a companion to studies of large fish and marine mammals. And lastly, the passive and sampler and sensors developed and applied to assess the distributions and concentration of pollutants in the water and to detect, most importantly, is to detect new pollutants chemicals. So I think that's all from me. Thank you.